In the past 12 months, I booked around 3,000 sales calls and I've sent well over 5 million cold emails. Now, during that time, I've learned a lot about what generates real results. However, I've also learned what doesn't work. And in this video, I'm going to reveal the #1 cold email killer that most businesses completely ignore. In fact, some of the biggest businesses I talk to are making this exact mistake. I'm talking businesses doing well over $10 million per year that have no idea that they're missing this piece of the puzzle. And it's not their lead list or their email scripts or their deliverability, but it's likely what's holding them back from booking any calls from cold outreach. Now, today I'm going to walk you through exactly what that is and how you can fix it immediately to improve your results. Now, like I said, when most businesses think that their cold email isn't working, they go straight to the usual suspects: the email copy, their list, their infrastructure, and so on. And when those things seem fine, they default to just crank it up more volume, assuming it's a numbers game and that they just need to play harder. But most of the time, it's actually none of that. Instead, the real reason they're not getting the results that they expect comes down to one thing, and that's the offer. Because most of the time, businesses see their leads come through channels like referral or inbound, which means the way that they structure their offer isn't necessarily optimized for complete strangers who've never even really heard of them before. And the bigger the business, the more resistant they are to admitting that they need to change it. Because if the offer's been working for everything else, then they just assume it should work for cold email too. And then they wonder why their cold emails never work. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, the good news is that the fix isn't really that complicated. You don't have to redo your entire cold email strategy from scratch. All you really need are 2 simple steps to make your offer cold traffic ready. And that's exactly what I'm going to walk you through now. But if you'd rather skip learning how to build a solid offer and just have our team handle everything from research to campaign execution instead, you can book a call below. We take care of every step of the cold email process with strategies that have allowed us to book over 3,000 calls in the past year. So if you'd like to see if we can help you do the same for your business, just click the link in the description below. Either way, that brings us to step 1, which is research. And before you skip past this being something you already know, hear me out. Because most businesses at this level have a lot of data. They've got a lot of client lists, sales calls, and they know all the pain points that their customers have. So they assume that's all that they need to build an offer. But knowing your industry isn't the same as understanding what appeals to a complete stranger on the other end of your email. Someone who has no context for why they need you or any pre-existing trust in your company or reputation, which means you need to understand them on a whole different level. Not just what their job title is or what their company does, but what they actually care about, what they've tried, what language they use, and what would make an offer from a stranger feel worth responding to. So even if you think you know your ICP like the back of your hand, if your cold emails aren't landing the way that you expect, chances are you just need to dig deeper. Now, let me show you exactly what I mean. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is jump into Claude. That's just my LLM of choice lately. And you're going to want to specifically use the Opus 4.6 model. So you're just going to drop this deep research prompt into your LLM. And for those of you who don't have it, I'll make sure it's linked down below. Just for the sake of this video, I'm going to have Claude explain the prompt just to show you guys the steps that I run through, because it's one thing to just copy my prompt and drop it in and see what you get out of it. It's another thing to actually understand the process that it's going through. But if we jump into the actual breakdown, you can see it's going to ask for 4 variables: your persona, job title, industry, geography, client service. And then it's going to break down 5 different layers, everything from tactical to psychological. So business pain points, emotional, personal drivers, trigger events, worldview, language, and competitive landscape. I think all 5 of those things really make an impact when it comes to understanding the persona that you're reaching out to. And I think they all play an important part when it comes to actually getting people to respond to your emails. So what I'm going to do is show you a bit of an example. I was having a conversation recently with a prospect in an industry I realistically knew nothing about. So this was HR staffing in the life science space. And prior to the conversation, I obviously wanted to do a ton of research to at least understand who they were targeting, what that person cares about, and so on. Just so that, when we were getting into the sales aspect of things, I could hold my weight in the conversation. So in this case specifically, we were targeting the VP and Director of Clinical Operations in the biotech and pharmaceutical space, US geography, and then you can see the client service there. So they're a boutique life science staffing and consulting firm. I think before we even run this prompt, it's very obvious that if we reach out to them, pitching this as a solution to help them scale their business and like generate more revenue, it would probably fall flat. So what we need to do is run this prompt to figure out what they actually care about, which I would assume is probably something more along the lines of like time to fill specialized roles, compliance risk, and things like that. So let's give it a shot and see what we get. So we can already see it's putting together something pretty elaborate. It's broken it down into the 5 sections. Again, business pain points, emotional/personal drivers, trigger events, we have worldview and language, and then lastly, we have competitive landscape. Now, I mean, best case, you test every single one of these core pain points in different variations of the offer, but let's just jump down into this key insight section here. You can basically see the main pain point here, which is the VP of Clinical Ops at a small to mid biotech is essentially being asked to run a Formula One team on a go-kart budget. So their biggest operational problem isn't finding a solution, it's the mismatch between the specialized talent that they need and what's actually available. So that's something that we can look at. Jumping into emotional, again, I would read through every single one of these, but the key insights is the emotional driver isn't I need help with staffing, it's I need someone who won't waste my time and actually deliver on the results. So these are all perfect things that you could be using in the offer, in the email, so on and so forth. Jumping into trigger events, you know, you have your typical stuff like funding round, regulation shifts, post layoffs, but you can see here the highest converting trigger is more so on a timing event. So the same VP who ignores a cold email in January will actually respond to one in March if they just close a funding round or lost 2 CTMs to a competitor. So these are all things that you could leverage in your offer or targeting. This is quite an interesting way of looking at it, but their worldview is I need someone who's done this exact thing before and I need them at this exact moment. So there is some urgency there. It could be a good spot to be in. And then you can see here, obviously you're going to get filtered out if you just drop general marketing speak. So that's going to be important to include as well. And then as you can see here, this is really like a hammer at home point. The competitive gap isn't about finding candidates, about trust and speed with quality. So those are all things that you're going to want to leverage in the offer. And again, this kind of distinction only really surfaces when you do the real research, and it's what separates emails that feel generic from emails that feel written for the exact person. And again, if you guys want this prompt, it's going to be in the description. Now, step 2 is actually building out the offer. And this is another point where a lot of businesses go wrong because their instinct is to lead with what they do, something along the lines of like, we help companies generate more pipeline. But a cold stranger doesn't really care about any of that because they have no real reason to trust that you can deliver it. And there's dozens of other people offering the exact same thing, which is exactly why you need what I call a front-end offer. Something that's small, specific, and low risk, at least enough that saying yes feels completely frictionless. So free audits are kind of like the easiest thing to think about. They're a decent example, or basically any sort of concrete deliverable that's tied directly to the pain points that you came across in your research. You don't want to pitch a strategy call or a free consultation because that's like asking them to spend time on something they aren't even sure is worth it yet. But instead, you want to offer something that they can actually picture themselves getting real value from before they spend any time or any of their resources. And the best way to find what lands is simple. It's to come up with multiple front-end offer variations, run them across all of your campaigns, and let the data tell you what the market actually responds to. So let me show you exactly how to build those out. Now, I don't want to oversimplify this process because I think coming up with a good offer is probably the hardest part of this whole thing, and truthfully takes years of being in the space and really understanding human psychology and buyer psychology, just what makes people take action. But luckily, we can use AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting and then let the market decide, again, what is actually going to be worthwhile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into this Claude project here that I've built out, another one of the prompts that I'll share below, and we're going to ask it to come up with a front end offer. Specifically, we're going to want to jump into at least 3 to 4, but ideally you run one front end offer for every single, let's call it like 2,000 leads that you have. So if you have something like 10,000 leads, you can do 5 front end offers and just test them out that way. But regardless, we're going to bring the research that we just did in the deep research section, and we are going to run it here. We're not going to use a specific URL because I don't have a specific company in mind. And again, the prompt is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The research is really giving it the backbone of what it should be focusing on, and then we'll see what it can come up with. We might have to do some back and forth, but generally it's pretty good to start. I think most people run into the problem where they just jump into something like Claude and they just try and like one shot a bunch of offers, but it really is a multi-step sequence that you have to follow through to make sure you're doing the right research, providing it the right research to come up with the offers, and really just taking it step by step. But as you can see here, it's already starting to pull some information for us. So what they want, what they find credible. So it's essentially come up with 3 value propositions and 3 different front-end offers for each of those. If you wanted, you could go back to the research doc and come up with a front-end offer for every single one of those 5 main points and every single one of the drivers within them. Honestly, determining what the market is going to chew on is really just a matter of testing every single thing that you think is viable and following the numbers. But in this situation, it came up with 3. We have the CRO gap fill, the timeline saver, and the post restructure rebuild. So the CRO gap fill essentially says that the biggest frustration that this persona has is that the CR teams that under deliver. So the front end offer is we'll send you 3 to 5 pre-vetted candidate profiles that match your therapeutic area and trial phase within 5 business days, no cost, no commitment. The next one, timeline saver, stop losing months on unfilled clinical ops roles, pre-vetted candidates from 100K referral network delivered in days. Front end offer, tell us your hardest to fill role and therapeutic area. We'll send a short list of qualified available candidates within 1 week, free, no strings. Post restructure rebuild, we'll build together 3 to 5 contract ready clinical ops professionals. So it looks like it really leaned heavily on the front end offer of actually providing potential candidates. And I think that that's great. I think that's something that I've seen work really well in this space, but they've almost positioned them in 3 different ways. Again, I think this is fantastic. It's leaning on what offer I think would probably be the best in this case, but it's doing a lot of the testing based on the value prop, not on the front end offer itself. I think when it comes to testing offers, you really want to test a ton of different offers first. And then the second phase of testing would be testing the value prop or pain point associated with that offer. And then, it trickles down from there. I think these are all really good. And you can kind of see how it goes from what like your typical email would be in the HR and staffing space to something far more sophisticated. And again, you're speaking the actual language to the person that you're reaching out to with exactly what they care about. And that's exactly what's killing most cold email campaigns at this level. But nailing the offer is only one part of the system, because even with a solid offer, you still need to write compelling emails and send them to the right people if you want to book more calls. So if you'd like to see the entire setup that we used to generate over 45 million in pipeline revenue from my clients, watch this video next and I'll see you there.